Hey y'all, the No Safe Words editors are back. And this time we're going to discuss ways you can bring those editing costs down. We'll talk self-editing tips, handling beta readers, a checklist for every author, and cheaper editing options such as reducing the project's scope and hiring on freelancer platforms. This is The Writer's Journey. I'm your host, Lauren Moore, and with me is the clever Kayleen Williams. We're two authors on a journey to learn more about writing with you, the audience, so thank you for joining us. Tonight's guest, you know her and love her, a standout editor in the independent scene since 2013. Her credits include over 1,000 titles, landing her clients on Amazon's top 10 sci-fi authors on several occasions. Editor in charge of the Apocalypse Weird Metaverse, she edited 7 volumes of the international best-selling Future Chronicles anthologies, 6 volumes of Beyond the Stars, and Keystroke Medium's titles Kingdoms of Iron and Stone, and Horizons Beyond. She is the founding partner of No Safe Words LLC, as well as editor and producer for Keystroke Medium. Ellen Campbell, welcome back to the show.
You make me sound so important.
Oh, you are, that's why. Yeah. I just copied and pasted and then read it off.
Well, you did a nice job.
She's way too modest. She's even better than what was just read.
It's true, it's true. Made so many books sound amazing.
Better, I hope, anyway.
Now this tonight I'm pretty excited about because our #1 fan requested topic was this one. How can I make editing costs go down? How can I, what can I do before my manuscript goes to my editor? Are there other ways of editing on a budget? And since we're editors and we work from the developmental side all the way down to proofreading, there's got to be some ways we can kind of put our heads together and figure out how to make these manuscripts better, make the editing process smoother, and especially to be able to do this on a budget. It's tough. So what do you think, ladies? Can we do this?
I think so.
I think we can.
All right. First thing, last week we were talking about how one of the easiest ways to bring editing costs down is to realize that time is money. Your editor's time is money. So if your manuscript takes your editor longer to edit, this will be reflected in the rates. What issues, Ellen and Kayleen, and we'll start with you, Ellen, what issues slow you down as an editor in the editing process to make that project just take longer and longer and longer?
Probably the most common thing that will really bog me down is if you don't know how to punctuate dialogue. I mean, having to change your punctuation for dialogue every single time really, really slows it down. Other than that, poor spelling, bad sentence structure, if you format it strangely and I can't read it.
You would be surprised. I've seen some formats, man, that are like you wouldn't think it's something that you could mess up, but you can.
Okay. Yeah. So what would be the standard format that you're looking for when you get a manuscript to you? What makes it quicker?
Industry standard for sure is industry standard for a reason, and that's because it's the easiest to read. And that's going to be Times New Roman, spaced 1.5 or 2, 12-point font, and nothing funny, no funny business, and a 1/2-inch indent for paragraphs.
Yeah, don't be tabbing at the start of every paragraph. Get that stuff set up before you start writing. You go to a little paragraph thing, there's a little down arrow. The first line indent, you put 0.25. You take off any of the before and after lines, make that 0, and then the line spacing 1.5 or 2, and you'll be good to go. All you have to do is continue to type, hit enter, and you'll automatically indent, and it's glorious.
All right, that's good. Are there other things aside from formatting and dialogue punctuation that really slow down the editing process? And what kind of difference in time could it take you to edit, let's say 100,000 words manuscript? What kind of time range are we looking at here?
3 days to 3 weeks.
Okay.
3 days to a month. I mean, depending on how bad your sentence structure, how badly you phrase things. I mean, how convoluted the sentences are, how badly you punctuate, your grasp or lack thereof of your vocabulary words. You know, when you think things mean that they don't. When you think things mean something and they mean something else. Yeah.
Which is why we love Ellen, because she makes sure that we sound smarter than we are.
I try. I really try. But trying takes time.
I have, I've done a 34,000 word edit in like 2.5 days, but that one was already really clean. It just really needed that last, pair of professional eyes to, think about each sentence, how it's going into the next, and then picking out any, dangling things like, hey, you mentioned this up here, but now suddenly it's gone, that sort of thing.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah. and for the most part, I mean, if we're talking 100,000 words, I'm automatically thinking 6 weeks. But that's because I also am, majority of the time, my clients want that developmental edit. So I have to take extra notes. I have to really pay attention. This happened here. This was mentioned there, and make sure all that flows going through. And then at the same time, simultaneously doing line edits. That's, 4 to 6 weeks minimum for me on that, usually.
So we're seeing a difference between days versus weeks. Now, Ellen, what kind of manuscripts get you excited? What do you look forward to? Which ones are a smoother editing process for you? What makes them quicker?
If it's clean. I mean, I love to edit Rick Partlow because he hands you something that's basically ready to go. You just have to kick him here and there for excessive hyphenation and repetitive use of words on the list and things like that. If it's clean, if it's really well paced, if it all makes sense, if it just flows, then it's easy to edit.
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that makes it the most difficult is when you're having repeat information. So you're setting up your scene and, you say XYZ, and then they're going along, they're dialoguing, you have a little action, and then we get a little bit of YZ. And I'm like, we just went through this. Right. And then there's backtracking where they're like, oh, right, this character was here at the beginning of the scene. And now I'm like, okay, now I got to go back all the way up here and figure out how we can re-implant character up here. So it's not like, by the way, reader, this character was here the whole time.
Don't forget the summary and then the recap.
Yeah.
Or the recap and the summary. Which one comes first? Anyway, one's at the end of the chapter, one's at the beginning of the next chapter. Yeah. You don't have to tell us 5 times. Introduce it once and keep going. And then maybe you won't have the problem that Kayleen's talking about where you've got a character there that wasn't there 5 minutes ago and just appeared out of nowhere that has to be inserted in or it doesn't work. So
repeated information can slow us down too. If it's storytelling, the prose, it's conveying information, and then we get the same information later when the characters start talking about it, and then the characters have said what the narrator just said, or then the action shows it too. So
that's
go through and pull out the repeated information.
Well, I'm working on one right now where literally he will narrate what the information he wants to convey, and then he'll write it in dialogue, and then he'll tell have the character tell us what he thinks about all of it. So 3 times in a row, that the mafia boss is meeting with whoever in X place. And then it will continue to be a topic of discussion for the next few chapters.
Yeah. One huge thing, especially since it's a lot of what I have been editing recently, where there are, teams that need to go in and infiltrate. So they've got to talk about their plan. And then as they're infiltrating, they're reminding what is the plan. And then they've got to reset the plan. And then the narrator talks about the next part of the plan, action sequence the plan, and then the characters dialogue the action sequence of the plan as it's being narrated. So it becomes this compounding,
tedium,
never-ending repeat. It's like, I get it, they're going through a door. They need to go there and go left. So it's that sort of thing. If I didn't have to sit and think about, okay, we need to know this first. Characters talk. action happens, whatever it might be, I could go through and just make the sentences stronger instead of having to re-flow the scene because it's so repetitive.
And it's not ever necessary, almost never necessary, to excessively stage direct your characters. I mean, I don't need to know. I walk to the door. I open the door. I walk through the door. I close the door behind me. Oh, I forgot my keys. I opened the door. I walked through the door. I closed the door behind me. I walked across the room. I looked for my keys. I don't need to know all that. Oh, I had to go back for my keys. That's all you have to say. It doesn't have to be a 2-page dissertation on how you got to your keys.
Now, if you're hiring an editor to edit this manuscript and you're hiring for a copy edit or a line edit, copy is the grammar and spelling, line is the sentence level edit, you might hire that editor and they'll make your grammar great, but it's still talking about the keys and it's still talking about walking through the door and it's still talking about walking out the door. So pulling a lot of that out and then looking at the scene and asking yourself, how can we build tension in this scene for the reader? What information needs to be told when to build the maximum amount of tension and make this a fun, enjoyable ride? I kind of compare it to a roller coaster, right? With the tension building and then zooming down. That's a developmental edit. But developmental edits can get very expensive. So are there ways of accomplishing a developmental edit, either on your own or with a beta reader, or is there another way to do it to save costs here?
If you are capable of being objective, and you're not, but I mean, if you're more objective than the average person, and you can sit down and ask yourself, does this need to be here? How does this serve the story? And answer it honestly, you can weed a lot of that out yourself.
Yeah. Another way, especially if you're really new at taking that deep look at your manuscript and the story and how it's progressing. Break your scene down to an outline level where it's just this chapter and scene opens, one little sentence. Then there's dialogue. What is this dialogue about? What is it saying? How is it moving that scene forward? What is it telling the reader? And then how is the scene then through the narration, that prose where you get that scenery and all that good stuff, the action, whatnots.
Walking across the room is not action.
Yeah. How is that adding to, not repeating, how is it adding to what was already said? What is different about this next part of the scene? If you can, oh God, she's on the, okay. If you can do that objectively, then you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead. Yes, there she goes.
Or if not objectively, honestly.
Honestly, yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
No, because I'm the one that started with objective. But yeah, what can you do? It's can you ask yourself and answer, how does this serve the story? Is it funny? Is it giving information that's necessary? Is it entertaining in its own right? How is it driving the plot? What is it doing for the story? And then cut it out when you discover that it really didn't need to be there. Because a lot of it really doesn't need to be there.
It's true. It's kind of wonderful how great the manuscript can look after it's just had like the weeds pulled. And all of a sudden there's this beautiful garden left behind and you had no idea that all of that was there just because it was kind of like choked out with all these extra words and phrases. So ladies, what are some steps most authors can take to get their manuscripts ready for an editor, which will save the editor time, which saves us money?
Well, you can start by when you think you're done, run your software's spell checker and grammar checker, whatever you're using. If you're using Word, it's up in the tools. I don't know what Google Docs is using, but every program has one, has something. Run that. Start there.
Yeah, if you have the Perfect It, run the Perfect It. Especially those military sci-fi guys, the procedurals, anywhere where you're going to have odd word fantasy. You've got your funky spellings where an I and an E get mixed up, and no one's going to notice that. Not when you. Yeah. Anyway, because Perfect It will help catch those, and then I won't have to sit there and work as hard to find those.
Yeah, if I have to go through your document one gekek at a time to make sure the K's are in the right place, I mean, that takes me a lot of time to do that, especially in a 100,000 word document that you've been very repetitive about. I have to go through and change that individually because it has to have human eyes on it, or if you have perfected, run perfected. But yeah, I mean, can you imagine how many times you mention a main character's name in 100,000 words, but you got it backwards half the time? You can't just assume that you caught it. You have to go and look at every single one.
And if that does happen, and I'm like, so I'm not sure on the spelling. Either I'm gonna don't you chew my thing. Definitely contact the author and be like, hey, how is this supposed to be spelled? Spelling lists are also helpful. If you can send us a correct, this is how this is supposed to be. If maybe you don't have the current capabilities to do those things we were just talking about, you'd be like, hey, I just want to make sure everything of these words are spelled right because they're weird. You know, like one of my characters in my first series, his name is Pierce, but I have the I and the E switched. So I had to really go through and make sure that it was correct when I was using it as his name because it was a weird spelling. So that can also help us if we're already aware that there's going to be issues as far as that. So
But there's potential for issues, not that
There
there's
you go.
necessarily going to be. Or you can name all your characters Bob. We would like that very much.
Yeah, it's one of the jobs of a copy editor is to keep a style guide, and that would include a list of any made-up words, which would be all character names. It would include place names. It would include words that are made up. If you're in military science fiction, you might want to keep a spelling for your weapons. Sometimes they're hyphenated, sometimes they're capitalized or uncapitalized in different ways. So at minimum, if you just keep a list of all of those words and then you can check them. But that's something you don't need to hire someone to do. That's something that we can do. And then just check to make sure that your characters' names are spelled the same way throughout. I've had one manuscript series where the main character's name is often, it's one thing that I check to make sure that it's spelled right. Yeah, let's do this. Let's get this right. All right, go ahead. Other tips that authors can apply?
Well, yeah, no, Alan, don't say that. Yeah, read it. Read it yourself, self-edit, do it. Don't write it, then skim over the trouble spots. Do a self-editing pass, and then do another self-editing pass. And then, yes, do another one. Okay, I know nobody wants to hear this, but Hugh Howey does 10 self-editing passes at a minimum on all of his stuff before it goes to editing.
10, wow.
Yeah, a minimum of 10. And Hugh Howey has 2 series right now in production for television. So, you know, I'm not saying it's because he did his own self-editing, but I'm saying it didn't hurt.
Right. Yeah, I believe you totally. When I did King of Sidonia, and you edited that for me.
I did.
I edited that maybe 5 times before it went to Richard. Richard read through it and he edited it. Then he sent it back to me and then I went through it again. Then it went to you and you edited it. And then I went through it again. Then it went to a proofreader, an editor who proofread it. And then she proofread it, went back to me, and I read through it again. And in each of these passes, we all found mistakes to fix. Or not even a mistake, maybe there's a way to say it better. There's a way to make that character sound more like that character. But yeah, there were legit typos even on that final pass. So I think any of us can improve. The edits could be suggestions for things that are wrong, but they really could just be making the character stronger, making the pacing better, making the story itself stronger. Finding a better opening line, finding a better closing line.
But the better it is to start with, when you hand it to your editor, the better it's going to be when you get it back. It's, you know, it really makes a difference.
That's a goal. All right. So what should if I'm going to self-edit my manuscript and I'm doing these self-editing passes, what are the sort of things I should look for?
You should, if you're smart, you're going to know where you're weak. You're going to know what words you consistently get wrong, and keep a list of those, and go back and look for those words that you consistently get wrong. Probably the biggest favor that you can do yourself, though, is to, when you finish it, throw it in a drawer or put it in a locked file or whatever, and let it sit for at least a month, and then come back and read it again, and you'll be amazed at what you find.
Yeah,
will.
I've done that before, and it feels like I'm reading someone else's book.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, why did I write that? I can't believe it.
Did I know I write that? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. What was I thinking? But maybe I come up with an idea for how to make that passage better.
You can try reading it aloud to yourself. That you'll get some value from that, but you'll get even more value if you can get somebody to read it aloud for you, to you.
Mm-hmm.
And there are computer programs that will do that. You don't actually have to make your wife do it, although, some wives will. The problem being that if you're reading it, your brain is still seeing what it thinks is there, not what's there. And somebody who hasn't written it will be seeing what's there. And you'll be hearing it instead of looking at it. So you catch it there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So usually you'll make the same mistake again, but hearing it changes it.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
because
because
second the computer reading it back to you, because it does it in a monotone voice. It's not even, there is no inflection. So they've gotten better though. I will say they have gotten better. And a lot of them are free, which is nice. You won't have to pay any extra money. But I did that through the last 2 books of my first series. I had my tablet reading it to me, and then I'm just sitting there, doing whatever else I'm doing, out coloring or something, doing the dishes, and I'd be like, no, wait, that sounded very strange. I'm already lost, or wait, that doesn't sound like they read it right. And then I would pause it and I would just make a note, and then I'd go back later, and sure enough, there might be a misspelling. That passage was just confusing, just written a little weird. That sentence was just a little structurally off. Just like, there's an epic one right there. So yeah, it can definitely help with that.
Yeah, we put our heads together before the show to come up with some different things that authors can do during that self-editing pass. One thing we said, if a line or a scene or paragraph, sentence, a phrase, a word, whatever it is, isn't needed, cut it. We already talked a bit about what are some of the different things that might not be needed. It just might be extraneous information. It might be repeated information. Just cut it. But it's not serving a story. That's it. If a line doesn't make any sense or sound awkward, just cut it or rewrite it. What about timeline and continuity errors? How can an author keep track of their timeline and figure out when there's been a mistake in the timeline and how to fix it?
Well, you could start by creating a timeline. I mean, if that's something that's going to be critical to your story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to track it. In my head, you're either that kind of a person or you're not that kind of a person.
That's true.
So, I mean, me telling you create a timeline, doesn't really help you if you're not going to do it anyway. But yeah, that's really the only thing I can think of for that.
So when I was at the point of, I'm talking about my own work, because then it's more personable that way. I'm right there with you guys. Where I'm like, I could maybe send this to an editor. I then go through and I read it chapter by chapter, and I do that by chapter mini outline. So I'm basically just outlining what I've already written, because I know it's there. I don't need to think super deep on what this sentence, how this sentence is built, did I use this word or that word? I don't need to think about any of that right now. He's in the room, something explodes, it causes something over here to do whatever, there's magic and a dragon appears, super basic, just exactly how it's going to happen, the big chunks, so that I can see it. And by doing that, I actually realized I had created a 10-year timeline gap for one of my characters. one of my characters needed to be somewhere 10 years prior. And I had to figure out how to get him there. Otherwise, this whole thing I had been creating wouldn't have made any sense. I mean, it took me almost 2 weeks to figure it out because it was this whole time traveling thing. I don't ever want to do time travel again. I had to work through time travel. So I actually had 3 different timelines going because of a certain character going back and forth. I had to keep that in order. Figuring out where this character was for him to be able to say this because that's but thankfully when I was at that point I did that and it brought that to light and I was just like, wait a minute, if he's here saying that, then he needed to be here this whole time, but that point happened 10 years before this point. So I would highly recommend that. It takes an extra bit of time and diligence, but by that point, you should already be so familiar with your story, having gone through, the vomit draft, having gone through stitching everything back together so it makes more sense. You've gone through the cleaning up your prose, taking hard looks at your dialogue. Now you're just, as you're saying, making sure all the content, the continuity, all that stuff is in line. At that point, chapter 1, okay, yeah, he's here, he's there. Okay, right at chapter 2, oh yeah, they're doing that. Oh, I forgot about this. Write that in. It doesn't have to take a long time, but it could save you a huge plot hole fiasco.
Yeah, as a copy editor, what I've done in the past is I've made a chart that basically represented a week, and I marked down for each day of the week what happened when. And every time I did it, even in books that were romances and weren't plot heavy, like weren't timeline heavy, as opposed to military science fiction or hard science fiction where time can play a big role in the plot, I always found some kind of an error there with the days getting mixed up. Often in fantasy, I'll find that a battle scene might start at dawn or might start in the night, and then by the end of the scene, the sun has risen or the sun is suddenly noonday. In the chapter, when the author first started writing, maybe it was 2 months ago, he wrote the scene at night, but then something happens in life with the author, and he picks up writing his book later, and he's forgotten that he started that scene at night, and now all of a sudden the sun's out during the day. So little things like that the reader might pick up on, but we might miss as an author just because of when we actually wrote our book. We might have started writing that book a few days ago and forgot how we started the chapter. Yeah, Kayleen.
Tip to avoid that huge thing and save your editor's time and potentially a higher cost on edit. When you have to stop, because it happens to me all the time. When you have to stop partway through a scene, partway through a chapter, and then, maybe you don't come back to it until later that day. Maybe it's a couple days. I mean, who knows? I've had to take like a week before I could touch my manuscript again. When I go back into the scene, I'm at the beginning. I am starting reading from the beginning. I don't care if this is the 20th time I have read this. I am reading it from the beginning because I know I haven't finished writing it. It's been, even if it's an hour, my whole mojo is disconnected. The little things are no longer fresh and flourishing inside my brain. So read it from the beginning and then continue your writing. And then that could seriously help because then you'll know you've just read it. They're in the middle of the day. You have the day in your brain. You're like, okay, about this much time. Now we can hit sunset. And then you can do sunset descriptions instead of suddenly nightfall out of nowhere. So yeah, read it from the beginning. If you have to take a break from it, that's too long. That stuff's no longer going to be fresh.
All right, another thing I look for as an editor is strong opening and closing lines to the book and then to the chapters. Because there's nothing like a good opening line to the chapter to kind of hook the reader's interest and pull them through. And then the final line of the chapter to close that up.
Yeah, but could we leave the pithy one-liners at the end of chapters? Can we just leave those in the past where they belong? Because y'all are just beating them to death. I mean, if it's good, it's good, but I mean, don't force it. Don't force a pithy one-liner at the end of a sentence because it just makes your reader roll their eyes.
That's true. That's true. So what do you like at the end of a chapter then?
I like it to be the end of a chapter. I mean, it has to be the end of something. It has to be the end of something so that the next chapter can begin.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a specific thing, except for it has to be. I mean, you could end a chapter in the middle of a scene and pick it up again in the next chapter. So it just has to work.
Yeah.
Without a pithy comment.
Yeah, but you still like check it, you know.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean, Lauren, when I say pithy comment at the end of a...
Well, kill your darlings, right?
No, I'm talking about, like... Hang on, because this guy that I'm doing now is driving me crazy.
Oh, you get some live action. Oh, yeah.
Live action, yeah. Almost live action.
Boom, boom. Oh, okay. While she's looking that up...
at least for this old dog we are. Or at least for this old dog they are.
So that's almost...
Like, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a saying everybody knows.
Well, or... this guy, seriously.
Okay.
And I wasn't ready for death. Not yet. You know? That was, of course, if the day could be kind enough to grant me such serenity.
So it's almost like it's concluding the whole thing with just like a not necessarily snide remark.
No, pithy, Pithy. It's kind of meant to be. It's meant to be amusing, but making a point at the same time.
Saying a whole lot with few words.
Yes, that's where I was going with my thing. It's like it's trying to conclude too much with a funny, but it's not really funny comment.
Yeah, especially when it's hackneyed and overdone.
Okay, so here's an example: huge epic battle scene that you're just like enthralled in. There's a character that have died, and then I don't know, crap.
And then somebody says, "It ain't over till the fat lady sings."
Right. See, there we go. Right there. And then you're just like,
really?
You should have just ended it at the character dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, Keeling, did you have a spotlight for us?
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you for reminding me.
And it's a good one.
Scrolling. All right. 2 days, 2 nights. Spotlight is The Writing Dream and How to Make It to Happily Ever After by Lauren Moore, Josh Hayes, and Scott Moon. That's right, people. The one and onlys. Writing. Something you've always dreamed of doing, but there's just not enough time. Or maybe you've already written a book, or 6, but they aren't doing well. With nearly 50 million books on Amazon today, what can you do to make your book stand out? From the popular podcast Keystroke Medium Live, Josh Hayes, Scott Moon, and Lauren Moore pan the gold from hundreds of author interviews, anecdotes, tips, and advice from authors across the publishing spectrum and all over the globe. We've chosen the very best of it, time-tested and proven successful, backed up by our personal experience. Whether you can't find the time to write, you don't have a clue how to market, or you just need to fine-tune your process, there's something in this book for you. Click now, buy, or doom. Because we must have doom.
Of doom. Of doom. The happiness of doom.
All right, what are some other things that we can look for in that self-editing pass? We can check for ourselves. One thing that I found myself doing a lot as an author is a lot of the characters sounded like me, or they sounded like one character, and I guess it was me.
That's a huge thing. Yep.
And that's something I see a lot as an editor, and that can take me time to kind of like, pound my brain and kind of think, how can I make this character more sound uniquely them? It's something that I take time as an editor to do, But what can we do as an author to our own book before it goes out to an editor to make those character voices unique?
Well, don't give everybody the same verbal tick. You know, don't. If everybody drops the article at the beginning of a sentence, the or and or but or whatever, if nobody uses those at the beginning of a sentence and everybody just clips their sentences, they all sound exactly the same. And that's the one that I'm seeing the most of right now, is people, you know, dropping the articles and clipping the sentences for everybody.
Yeah.
My biggest one is everyone talks with exactly the same pacing. They are always, you are, they are, we are going to, I am. There's no theirs. There's no weers. You know, no one has a gunna. You know, no one has anything unique. They all are talking, you know, borderline perfect English. You know, it's there's no apostrophes anywhere unless it's a plural, you know, what have you-ness.
Yeah. People speak in contractions. They just do.
Yeah, there's the word I was looking for. There's no contractions. This is why I don't copy, but I try. But, you know, and then I'm going through, I'm like, okay, this character is a little juvenile. He's probably, he or she's probably not going to have as much explanation on something, even though they do have this, you know, position, but they're not going to be like, we are going to infiltrate the base. It's like, man, we need to go infiltrate. Where is everybody? You know, like add in some shit, you know? That's just personalities, right? Who's super angry? Who is a little airheaded? Who gets just really super excited over no reason? Who injects inappropriate comments or, oh my gosh, you remember the time when? Not now. Okay, this is not the time for that. You know, you can add those bits of flavor. Don't give it to every character. Don't do it for every scene.
Right.
Because you can easily overdo it. But you know, if you pepper in that stuff, and if you can find those personalities, you know, understand who your characters are at their core. Maybe tie them to somebody you know. Maybe some random person you overheard talking in the supermarket, right? And you're just like, ooh, that person would be great for a character. Keep them on a loop in your mind whenever you're writing, you know, dialogue, and then that dialogue will come out fresh because it's unique to them.
Okay, so on the writing side, you can anchor a character to a specific person. That could be someone from a movie, that could be someone in real life, and you know just how they talk. Make that anchor strong. Now, Ellen, on the editor side, I noticed that you're really good at kind of figuring out voice, figuring out the narrator's voice and the character's voice, and just sharpening it, making little tweaks and changes. How do you do that?
I don't know.
How do you breathe, Ellen?
I don't know. The words just come to me.
Blood.
I don't know. I just look at it and the words say, we don't want to be here, fix us. And then I put the right words in. I
don't know. A lot of this
it's very intuitive kind of thing.
It's instinctual. Like, I mean, like I can explain a lot of things that I do and how I come to conclusions, how I set myself up for it. But, you know, at the end of the day, well, how do you know when something's wrong? Because I read it and in conjunction with everything else around it, it sounded wrong.
Yeah, it's what Kayleen said, but it's like when it's at a visceral level, knowing when a few is better than several, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. You know, you just either know or you don't. But it's not something that it's something that you can learn. I mean, if you read enough, I guess.
And one of the toughest things, I guess, hopefully adding on, that I notice is, you know, the repeating of certain types of actions, the repeating of certain types of word formations. As a writer, we don't even notice. You know, we glom onto those because that's immediately what we do. And when we're self-editing,
no, he didn't. Stop it.
No, it's like, it's just like this clever line, right? You know, and we love it so much we don't realize that we repeat it. or certain setup for a scene. You know, it's like, it was a dark and stormy night. It's like, okay, you've had 5 dark and stormies. I'm sick of the stormies. We need to cut 4 of them and turn them into something else. You know, it's like, how else can we view this particular part of the scene? Because we've already done dark and stormy.
Yeah.
So
maybe we could just leave it out altogether. Maybe it's not necessary here.
Yeah, and yeah, that too. I mean, if you've already described something, you know, the characters are in there, the reader is in there with the characters. You know, you don't have to keep reminding them about the light spilling in through the room, or the vibration through the floor, or whatever it might have you.
And you can assume when you're writing dialogue, when people are talking to each other, as a rule, they're looking at each other. You don't have to describe that for me, because I'll just know that I'll already know that, because you know that's how it works. When we're talking, we look at each other. You don't have to explain that to me.
It's implied, yeah.
Over and 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 over.
I would much rather see really good dialogue where I can hear that general, you know, it's like, damn it, Lieutenant, what are you doing? You know, I can just go, oh, I can feel it. Then, you know, the general glared, you know, he nodded. Like, I don't, stop it.
Yeah.
All right,
and I don't know who told everybody that the rule for dialogue is that you write the sentence, you break the first sentence with an action beat, or with a dialogue tag, and then you write another sentence with 2 parts, and then the next person has to speak, and they speak exactly the same way. You know, oh look, she said, over there, it's a castle on a hill. Oh really? He said, I believe you're right. It is a castle on it. You know, just.
And then you go into narration, the castle on the hill.
We're kind of combining all of our pet peeves here in one. But dialogue does not have to be, oh no, Ellen said, you people are stupid, period, and you drive me crazy. I can say more than that in one chunk with a tag, you know. Ellen said, stop it, you're driving me crazy. If you would just listen every once in a while, then you might be better writers, and you might save yourself a lot of money, and maybe I wouldn't charge you $400,000 a page to edit your work. So I can see all that at once. You don't have to break it up with, she's waving her hands angrily, or that I'm twitching nervously, you know? You don't let it all out. If the action
beat lends itself to the scene, put it in. If it's just, you know,
if it's there because you think it has to be there, it doesn't have to be there.
They're talking a lot. I need to remind the reader who's talking and that they're moving and they're not just a still person. Yeah.
There are even rules for punctuating dialogue that cover more than one paragraph at a time coming from the same person. Yeah. You can actually do that. People can say multiple paragraphs at a time, and we know how to handle that.
It doesn't need to be broken up.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Quick Google search, you'll find it. And if you have any questions about it, pop a question in the Keystroke Medium Facebook group, and I'm sure someone will be helping you out with that too. We want to help each other out. POV consistency, we're going to have a whole episode on that next week with Maya Cleve. She's a fantastic editor out west. She's going to be joining us on the show to focus on POV. So more on that next week, but that's another place where we can have errors pop up. For example, verb tense. If your book is written in past tense, you're going to have to stay in past tense. If it's written in present tense, you're going to have to stay in present. That's something that you can easily look up as you're reading through your manuscript to make sure that you're staying in the right verb tense. And also, if your chapter is written in a certain character's POV, you want to stay in that POV. That's something that you can look for. Or if you have beta readers, you could ask them to just focus on that one thing.
Or if you're like Kayleen, who likes to do really complicated POV shifts within a single chapter, because I'm dangerous, but neither of you hated it, so I fucking nailed it.
One thing, you guys, even if you're writing in past tense, when somebody thinks, they think in the present tense. So, even though you're writing in past tense, she doesn't think, you get it. I don't have to explain it. Because I can't pull anything out of my head that fast because it just occurred to me.
I know, I keep trying and I'm just like,
yeah.
I can do it better when I'm typing. But I just had to mention that because I was super proud of that.
Yes, yeah.
You don't think
There's different kinds of POV. There's omniscient. Actually, you write in third person omniscient a lot, which would get into different characters' head.
I do.
It's not common POV, so it's not something that we've talked about much on the show.
Okay.
We mostly talk about third person limited.
Yeah, that one I have a trouble with because I automate to omniscient. So I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's easier. But then you run the risk of head hopping.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, I would say I do it consciously. Like I am like being really super hyper aware, and sometimes I can get ahead of myself. But if you stay super aware, it's like I am going to be doing this blended POV. If you can keep yourself aware of that, then it can work. It can. I mean, so many things can work. But you need to know what it is that you're doing, and we shall talk about that more later. Go on and on.
Another thing that I love in manuscripts is when there's a balance between different kinds of sentences. When you've got some storytelling, some narration sentences, when you have description, visual description, sound description, sensory description, you have action, things happening. And it's not getting up and turning, but maybe it's a fight scene, or maybe it's a dragon flying scene, or a car chasing scene. There's things happening, and dialogue sentences. So those 4 different kinds. Oh, and internal reflection. Those 5 different kinds of sentences. You want to have a balance of all 5. If a chapter just has dialogue or just has prose, right? Just has paragraphs and paragraphs of narration, that can quickly get boring. So you want to use all 5 usually and kind of blend them together. That's something else I look for. All right, so let's talk about beta readers. We're going to have a whole episode on that, but just to kind of touch on that now, if you can find reliable, so what about beta readers? Alan, what do you think?
Oh, if you can find reliable beta readers.
Yeah, sorry.
What did I say? I said, hang on. I said, this wasn't the time that I said something about nobody cares. Yeah, your mother doesn't count. Nobody cares what your mother thinks of your writing. Try to find somebody that's not a super fan. You need somebody that's going to be objective and honest. And it's really hard to find somebody that's objective and honest, because some people try really hard to think, well, I got to make some kind of a contribution. So I'm going to say that all of your sentences are, I don't know, just completely brain dead here today.
It sounded really good,
Up to that point. It sounded really good, except for, when you were unharnessing your conjunctions from the blah, 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 whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, try to find people that are going to give you reasonable feedback. It dragged right here or whatever. Because people... I've gone way off track with this. It's in people's nature to try and be helpful, even if they don't know how to help. So if some people, many people will, not consciously, but they'll make things up to say
something.
Yeah, they'll make something up to tell you, well, I have to come up with something because he wants my opinion, and my opinion is that you're mixing your grade tenses, which is not even actually a thing. So,
sure.
And you don't understand. It's like when you get bad feedback. People know that they didn't like it, but they don't know why, so they say something absolutely asinine.
This book didn't come with sausages.
Exactly.
One thing, know what kind of beta reader you want. So for the Marines like an URA that Frisbee and I are putting out, there have been hiccups. I will say that now. It will come out. There have been hiccups. We had those who are and have been in the military read the first few chapters to make sure that all that introductory information was, as accurate as it could be. And, we did get back a lot of really good. He's like, hey, a month for this is kind of too short. And I'm like, okay, but it needs to be short. And he's like, okay, well, maybe 2 months is probably like max minimum. And I'm like, sweet, we could do that. So it just made it that much more realistic, and just little things like that. When you can find good beta readers, knowing what you want from them is key. And not having the same type of beta reader is also really helpful.
A good beta reader is worth their weight in gold because you get a whole lot of the other kind.
Yes.
And beta readers can mess you up without meaning to. They can give you bad advice.
You must stay true to your heart. Sorry,
That's not necessarily true either, but the whole beta reading phenomenon, I mean, it's just, beta readers are wonderful and useful and necessary, but they can do an awful lot of damage, and they have done an awful lot of damage to a lot of people.
At the end of the day, you know your story best. You know, if you get 3 beta readers and all 3 of them are commenting on the same thing, that might be something that you need to take a look at.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a good indication.
You know, if you know, one was like, I loved it. It was really slow through here. Oh my gosh, I love this part. And it's like, okay, well, they thought it was too slow. They loved it. Do you really need to fix anything? Because there's always going to be those readers who don't like your work. They're not going to like the way you write. They're not going to like your characters. They're not going to like your story world. It's going to happen. Yeah. You know, those aren't your readers then. That beta reader was not your reader.
And you're going to find the other way around too. A super fan wants to be a beta reader. That can be a mixed blessing. I mean, they're not going to be critical because they love everything you write. I mean, that's a possible fallback to that. So,
you know, and for those, you could be like, hey, you know, if you find any misspellings, you know, I'll, you know, give you the advanced copy, you know, before it goes live.
The ARC, yeah.
Yeah, the ARC copy, you know, and if there's any, just hit me up with the list of any misspellings that you find. If you have it like a missed ball, you know, like there was a gun and now there's no gun. You know, if you find those, let me know. And super fans can be utilized in that way.
Yeah. Because
they're still going to love what you do, but they can still be able to find those things that 10 pairs of eyes are still going to miss.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So give them something specific to look for. That's one way of doing it. Another way is you could use them as proofreading. I've seen that done a lot. And again, be careful when you accept suggestions from them. But some people are really happy to find typos. That gives them joy to find typos. I mean, I understand that, right? To fix them. But if you give them something specific to look for, like Walt loves giving feedback on weapons use and ranking and all of those technical details. So he would be a great resource either as someone like, Walt, can you please look at chapter 8, you know, just chapter 8 and maybe 15, these 2 sections. He would be happy to. And there's a lot of veterans out there and guys in the military who'd be happy to look at specific parts of your manuscript. It's the same thing with, in science fiction, you might have physics problems. We talk a lot about fighting in zero gravity. Like
gravity.
The ships, the map.
I'm getting mildly better.
Yeah, so find a beta reader who can just focus on one aspect of your story. And specifically, if you can think about your genre and what are the tropes that your genre readers expect, what are they looking for? And if you can find a beta reader who loves that genre so much, right, they can be that person who can focus on one aspect of your novel or just maybe the reading experience, give them clear direction, focus, make it 1 or 2 things, and I hope that the feedback you get from them would be more helpful from that. All right. We also came up with a checklist for authors to use before sending their manuscript off to the editor. Actually, Ellen came up with this checklist. Ellen, what is on this checklist of last-minute things an author can kind of run through before sending the manuscript off that will save everyone time and money?
Okay. It's just not that much stuff to look at, but first thing is this the right version, or am I about to send my editor the one that I chucked in the toilet 2 weeks ago? Okay. Check and make sure.
Really, really good. You know, I mean, even if you have to do V1, version 1, right? And then when you go on to the second V2, and then, you know, when you get to whatever V, that's the one that goes to the editor, or just change it completely. Final to editor. Make it super specific. I have to do that.
Final
like,
to editor for real.
1 to editor.
Really, 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 really to editor. Okay. Are all your chapters in? Did you get all your chapters assembled? And did you do it in the correct order?
Does that happen a lot? Do you guys get a lot of put together chapters?
Not a lot, but enough that it's not a surprise. Like, is there a chapter missing here? Is something missing here? Check and make sure that all your chapters made it back in. Especially if you're not numbering your chapters. Did you do a last pass for notes that you may have left yourself in the text? Because I cannot tell you how many times I come across things like insert sword fight here or a passionate speech that causes the peasants to revolt, or Joe proposes to marry, or go back and rewrite chapter 2 and write in the dragon that just showed up out of nowhere and killed the main character's love interest. I mean, you've got to follow through on these notes. Don't just leave them.
Okay, as a developmental line editor, if I'm like down in chapter 30 and I come across a note, go back to chapter 5, write in this whole thing, I'm going to be like, you what? Yeah. You still need, okay, we're going to pause. I'm going to contact you. There's an issue.
Yeah. Did you globally change somebody's name or the name of a ship or the name of a town? And if you did you check every single instance that of your global changing? Because sometimes if you pluralize or put an apostrophe S with something, your Glenn will still be George or vice versa, because
it's not going to
recognize the global change didn't recognize that it was the same person. So did you check all of that?
And if you change a name like Tim to Bob, then every word with Tim in it, like intimidation, is now going to have Bob in it.
If you're in Word and you're having that problem, then all you have to do is go up and change it to whole word only.
I didn't know that. I was just about to say put a space.
Yeah.
And then Tim, and then put a space.
Yes.
And
then find space Tim space, and it will only change within there. Instead of in Tim, so it doesn't become ingeorgiating.
Right. Yeah. Except for the problem with that is you won't get the Tims that are at the beginning of sentences.
Right. Yeah. Because there's no space there. Yeah.
Do what Ellen just said. Don't do what I said.
Either way, you got to check it. But yeah, the whole word thing. Yeah, that's good. Anything else? What else is on this list?
Did you run your processing program spelling and grammar checker or whatever it uses in place of it? Could do it. I mean, maybe it's not great, but it's better than nothing. And you're going to catch something every time. Trust me, you will. And did you format to industry standard or to your editor's preferred formatting? Because, if I have to reformat your document, that goes on the I charge you more next time list, And did you check the words that you routinely get wrong? Like if you get there and there mixed up, or if you get hoard and hoard mixed up, and you know that you mix them up, check them. Yeah. Check them.
I often get forward and forwards. I'm always like, okay, now look this up for the 10th time today.
Yeah, I do that with tree line. See, tree line is my water.
Yes. Tree line gets checked a lot. Yep. Machine.
I want it to be a compound word, and it is not.
Right. Yep.
Really? Oh.
And double check.
I
think it's hyphenated as a verb and it's 2 words as a noun, something like that. I always double check.
Yeah.
Do you see what we go through for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
These are the things.
All right. Now, are there any other cost-saving techniques aside from making the manuscript quicker to edit so that it's cheaper to edit? Are there any other cost-saving techniques? What I've been thinking about is that, I'm editing this 300-page novel, and I find myself making the same kinds of edits throughout all of 300 pages. And it makes me think, You know, if someone gave me the first 5,000 words of their novel and they're really good at self-editing, and they're on a budget, it's conceivable they could give me the first 5,000 words. I could edit that. They could take that and apply it to the rest.
Some people could. Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
That's not where the editing's done, but if they're on a budget and they really just have only that much amount to give to an editor, they could still get quite a good edit by getting those 5,000 words and figuring out, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's what I need to sort out. Here's some mistakes that I'm making, and I'm making them again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to keep on making these kinds of fixes to the rest. I think for a certain kind of author that might work.
Yeah, I think you need more than 5,000 words, though. More like 10. You need at least 10. At least 10.
10 to 20, just because, I mean, at that point, the character's going through, shifts in who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you just need a bigger statistical universe.
Yeah. That.
Sorry, Kayleen.
No, you're good. No, you're good. I'm surprised I'm functioning right now.
Yeah.
So there we go. Yes. Many authors could benefit from that. If you're going to take a critical look at the editing, what am I seeing most often being corrected? So hey, she said, what's going on over here? And blah, 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 blah. He turned. I saw that over there. And they're deleting all that. They're deleting the so. And then they're just starting it from the rest of the dialogue. They're deleting the he turned. Maybe they added, here's a suggestion for some action beat if you really need one here. If you're seeing that, okay, well, maybe I need to go through and take a look at all that dialogue. How many times, like Ellen had said earlier, am I breaking dialogue with tags within like the first couple of words? It's like, how are you doing over there? Okay, I said. Like,
so you figure out what your editor's doing to the dialogue, and then
the dialogue, the prose, and analyze it. Take that time to see, what it is. And if you can ask your editor, hey, if you could point out in comments maybe why you made a change, if you're going to do that kind of edit where it's like, hey, I'm going to send you the first 15,000 words. I don't have a lot to put towards, a heavy line or developmental edit, because those are definitely the most expensive out of the edits, developmental and line, because they take the most time. They're the most brain infusing as far as, I don't know, as far as I suppose. Anyway, they're time consuming. And then you can apply that to the rest of your 90,000 words. That would save the editor a lot of time from having to, okay, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna delete that. Yeah. It's time consuming. It is.
Once upon a time, or twice upon a time, or 10 times upon a time, I have assembled a list of words that if you're overusing, you're not writing as well as you could be. Mm-hmm. And that list is available in the file notes and the Keystroke Medium group. I will give Lauren an updated copy to put with the show notes. Use the list, weed out you're using all of these same words that are making your book sound like everybody else's book, and also not say anything, and also suck.
I've written, I don't know, off the top of my head, I can't remember how many short stories and full prose, and I have not used a single glance.
See?
I almost want to use one time, because I'm like, I've been so good. I deserve this glance.
Look,
but it has to be perfect.
You've been writing short stories, and from short stories, you've gotten quick feedback from different editors. So instead of spending 2 years writing a book and then getting editor feedback, you've spent, weeks, sometimes months, but, weeks we're talking about usually, writing your short story, getting it straight to the editor, getting feedback back, and then being able to put that in practice. So short stories have been a good kind of training ground for you. Are there other ways of reducing the project scope could save the author money? And it might not work for everyone, but are there other ways? I know that I've got some clients who really do not need a line edit, and they know it. They know their writing is very clean. They know they don't need me to spend time thinking how to make this shorter, quicker, more powerful. They only want me to fix what is wrong, to fix actual errors. And when I've got that in my mindset for how I'm going to edit, I'm just going to do a mere copy edit, and that's all. It saves me a lot of time, and it saves them a lot of money. So if you are an author who knows yourself, knows your writing, you're good with the writing, you may be able to work with your editor to kind of narrow the project scope and to give your manuscript only what it needs, and that can be one way of keeping the price down.
And that could also be if you do not yet have an editor that you trust to handle your words. Find the ones who are going to do the sample. And talk, or the ones, even if they don't do sample, talk to them. Talk to several, talk to at least 3 or 4, and see what they say about your sample. If they're all saying, I really recommend a line in a developmental, now you have an idea of budget. If one of them is saying, I really think you need to do a line in developmental, and the other 4, like, you just need a light line, but a really heavy copy, now you really know that you're going to save a lot of money because, like, again, developmental is the more expensive. And if the majority is saying light line, heavy copy, that's going to save you money. So getting quotes, get the quotes if you don't have, your own personal editor to talk to, can definitely give you an idea of where your writing is currently standing. Because as a brand new, you don't know. He was like, do I know if my writing is good? Like, I thought I was fantastic. And I'm not. I was not. I am getting better every day. But I had my mom and my friends to edit back then, 10 years ago. And, had I gotten, 5 or 6 editors that I don't know, here's the first chapter of my story. What sort of editing would you recommend for this? And you take that information, and that right there is going to give you loads of information on writing itself. I mean, it really does. Knowing what each of those are, dev, line, copy, proof, knowing what those are, yes.
Yeah, we've got about 15 editors, I think, in the Keystroke Medium group, and there's more joining all the time. So there's lots of fantastic editors out there, and there's even more in the 20 books to 50K group, loads and loads. So you can get those samples, you can see what the rates are, but again, from the sample, you can figure out what are they going to do with my words? How are they going to make my words stronger? What's the best fit? What's the best match? That's a very good way to do it. Now, one way we have heard of a cost-saving technique, do not do this.
Warning!
Oh, geez. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't talk about it, or don't?
No, go ahead. No, I'm warning them.
No, we're giving like.
We have heard with authors. We have heard of this, where they've taken their manuscript, broken it up into chapters, and then sent each chapter out as sample edits to a load of different editors. That's a good way of making editors know who not to work with. So they've got free edits for each of their chapters by doing sample edits for their whole manuscript. Do not do that.
On top of that, on top of the absolute mind-bogglingness of thievery, okay? Every editor has their own way of editing. Ellen is freaking ninja with the copy. I mean, she's like, she's going to get it. She's going to find it. It's going to be gone, right? Lauren, same thing. Plus line. She's gonna, wax on, wax off those lines. She's gonna strengthen up that copy. Me, I'm gonna come in like a freaking jackhammer. I'm gonna find the plot holes. I'm gonna strengthen up those words. I'm gonna take a paragraph and be like, you don't belong here. I'm gonna shove it up there. We all have our different strengths. And if you are sending chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3 to this, there, and everywhere, you're going to get 3 completely different edits. First chapter could probably end up being super clean for copy. Second chapter maybe not so much. And then the structure of your author voice could start to change based on how that editor is interpreting your author voice. So don't do yourself a disservice and don't get yourself blacklisted.
Yeah, because you're going to get yourself blacklisted and you're going to have a book that's incoherent and possibly slightly schizophrenic.
Right. 'Cause, yeah, a sample edit's not like fudge samples on the boardwalk where people are just, cutting it up in squares and giving it to you. Someone's spending an hour or two or more of their life to edit that book, but then they're putting their own kind of style and flair on it. And in which case, when you put it all together, it's going to sound like different people wrote that book because it's kind of true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, another thing I've had people do is an edit's going really well on the first pass. Everything's, I think I made the client happy, and then I've had a client after the first pass start complaints, and then I did another pass, and then the complaints kind of grew, and then she wanted her deposit back, and she wanted her money back, and she wanted all of that editing without any money. And since I was new and I hadn't established contracts, I went ahead and I gave her money back. Okay, so that
and she potentially could have just published a really strong story.
Well, I was concerned about her going on the internet and blasting me when I didn't have a client base yet and I was new. So
which is scary.
When you're working on the internet, right? We're kind of strangers to each other until there's a level of trust built, and that's where contracts come in. So whether you're an editor or whether you're an author, you want those contracts that kind of lay out who's doing what when and what happens if the relationship kind of falls through. So that's not a good cost-saving technique.
No.
Let me pay your dumb tax.
I have no idea what you just said.
Let me pay your dumb tax, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we all pay it one way or another, I think. Or at one time or another.
And I want to add on to, since we mentioned the do not ever do this disclaimer. If you are going to be sending out to several editors to get an idea of where your writing stands as far as what you need, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, send everybody the same set of pages. Yeah. If it's the first 5 pages, everybody gets the first 5 pages. You cannot properly compare if you're going to need a dev, if you're going to need a line, if you're going to just need copy, if you're sending one editor chapter 1, one editor chapter 5, and one editor chapter 30. You're
comparing apples and oranges.
Send everybody the same manuscript or the same set of words. That's your control. Send everybody your control and then figure it out.
All right. Now, what do you ladies think about finding cheaper editors using other platforms such as Upwork or Fiverr? What do you think?
I think there are good editors everywhere and there are bad editors everywhere. Just be careful. Vet them like you would vet anybody else. I don't have any objection to somebody going to Fiverr or Upwork. But don't feel like you have to settle either, whether it's on Fiverr or Upwork or not. If you get something back that you don't like, you don't have to hire that editor.
Yeah. And always talk to the editors. If you send an 80,000 word document and the estimate for price comes back $1,600, don't let that scare you. Maybe that editor will do payment plans. Most editors do half up front. That's going to be $800 up front. Do you have $800 up front? Talk to the editor. We're right there with you. We can work with you. I've had a client where, because of their financial situation, I split the document down into smaller chunks, which each chunk then was this amount, and paid for that amount. And then I would start on the next part and he wouldn't get that part till I got, and then so that's how they ended up doing that. You know, it was smaller chunks with smaller payments over a course of time. You know, that was one way. That was one way to do it. But if you talk to us, then there might be a way. You know, don't let the dollar amount scare you. I mean, if I don't know, I don't want to say if an editor ever says you have to pay it all up front. But I have not met an editor that is like, this is going to be a $2,000 edit, and I'm going to need it all before I start. I have never seen that.
That's not that uncommon.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's not that
because
uncommon.
I'm still too new, still a babe. But talk to your editor. You know, we're human. We have families. We have bills too. We understand.
And being willing to work with you is one thing, but don't, because I'm willing to work with anybody if they need working with, but don't play the I'm really poor and coronavirus killed my sea monkeys and I need a part for my car. Don't assume that an editor could or should work for less than they quoted you. I mean, there's a difference between being willing to take payments and charging you less, because that's not fair either. If I'm going to put 3 weeks of my life into this, I deserve to get paid for 3 weeks of my time.
Right.
Even if it takes you 6 months to pay.
I definitely wasn't saying expect a lower payment, but you know, there's payment plans for everything. You know, it's like you buy a $80,000 car, you make payments of X amount every month towards that car. Maybe that can be something you can work with for your editor.
Yeah. And with platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, and I found that, you know, the client posts a project, the editors kind of compete for that project, and you're competing with editors all over the world, having prices from all over the world too. And then Upwork takes 20%.
Ouch.
Yeah. So be aware when you're hiring an editor on the cheap on Upwork or Fiverr, and they're getting a couple $100s for that project. Those platforms are often taking a chunk of that money too. Your editor is now working for pennies. And then I've heard authors say, but that's okay. My editor is in India. My editor is in the Philippines. It's okay if they work for US pennies, because that means a whole lot more in their country. To me,
that's disgusting.
Honest wages, honest work should be paid for honest wages, no matter where they are all over the globe. They should be paid for their time. They should be paid for their expertise. That's where I'm coming from, and I think our audience, is doing that and is, paying people fairly for the work that they are doing.
That's like, you have a friend who draws fantastic portraits, and you're like, oh my gosh, could you please do a portrait of my daughter? It's like, oh yeah, sure. I do those for $100. Well, no, I mean, we're best friends. Like, well, no, I do those for $100. Like, don't be that person.
It'll be great exposure for you.
Yeah.
Right. But exposure is not going to put food on their table. Exposure is not going to pay their electric bill. And if you're in the Philippines, you still need to pay for the food, and you still need to pay for the electric bill, your family, and, hopefully put aside some money for retirement, all those good things, right? If they're paying in their time, that's their life, right? And so we should be helping them too by paying them financially, which is if you work at your job, it takes your time, you get money back for that, and now that's currency that you can use for someone else to help you to make your dream a reality, to get that book published, to make that book as good as it can be. That person's on your team, so we got to treat them well.
I want to add one thing really quick. Right before the show, I actually had an old friend of mine ask, what's the show going to be about tonight? And I told them, and they're like, oh, well, few questions. I'm like, yeah, for this, it might cost X amount. And they go, wow, well, that's a lot, but I suppose I understand. And I go, okay, yeah, but this type of editing takes me at a minimum 4 to 6 weeks. So if it takes me 6 weeks to do this, and I've and I've charged let's just do 1,500 because that's an even number. But it takes me 6 weeks to do that. If you break that down, I'm working for minimum wage. Or less. And when I said that to him, he's like, oh, well, no, that really makes sense then. And I went, thank you. So understanding what you're paying for is huge too. I mean, if you can find a cheaper editor on those platforms and they work for you, they are doing what you feel is best. You feel that their work is increasing the value of your words, then do that. Save the penny. I am all about saving the penny. I have worked my way up from the drudges, and if you need to save the penny, save it. But be aware of what you're getting and what you need.
All
right.
Sorry.
We're just looking at each other smiling, like, was there anything else on?
No. At this point, we're 20 minutes over. I'm delirious off of the last month and a half of my life. So I'm just, is there more? I could do more if you need more.
She could too.
All right. Oh my goodness. Lauren is looking like, nope, that was it. That was it. I'm still looking, but there's nothing. Any audience questions? No, they've just been attentively listening to our very word, which is awesome. And should y'all have questions after the fact, come check out the Keystroke Medium group. We're all very friendly. Me, Lauren, Ellen, Steve Boyer. Where'd she go? Jennifer? Yeah. Everybody's there.
Yeah.
Everybody's there. Like Lauren was saying earlier, there are a lot of editors in there. There's all the writers. There's all the words. Come hang out with us. If you have a question, if you're concerned, if you're feeling overwhelmed, bring it to us, and we shall do what we can to be tribe, because that's what it's all about. Every day, I am so thankful for each and every one of you, because tribe has made my whole life so much better. Can't even tell you. I'm going to get misty and teary, so I'm going to stop that right there because we don't want to see that mess. Hugs on the intranet. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ellen. Can you...
Oh, you're welcome.
I don't think we did this last week because like I said, so let's do it this week. Where can our viewers find you and not creepy stalk you?
And not creepy stalk me. I'm on Facebook, Ellen Campbell. My website, our website, No Safe Words, nosafewordsllc.com will get you there. Or dammitborer.com will get you there. BOORE will get you there. Yeah, but you hit me up on Facebook or send me an email through the site, and I'll get back to you.
All right, and that was nosafewordsllc.com. Do not forget the LLC. It's our own web address, and and it sends you to something that's like a 404. Don't forget the LLC.
Yeah, or it takes you someplace naughty.
It's not good. All right. Yeah, no, this is a good chat. This is good. Hopefully every person that views this walks away with at least one, if not a handful of tips for them to strengthen their writing. I mean, at the end of the day, I hope that's what we all want to do. Strengthen our writing, make our story stronger, make our characters more realistic, make them jump off the page where the reader is just like there with them. And it's just like, yeah, Danny, we're going to go slay the dragon, right? We all want to go slay the dragon. And we all want to be Danny. Let's just go do it. Let's just write those words. Let's get stronger. And be sure to check us out next week. I don't know what we're talking about, but it's going to be good. It's going to be stuff. It's going to be filled with all the words, because we're going to talk about reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Mediums, The Writer's Journey.